Welcome back to the Eight Man Breakdowns podcast. This is where we discuss all phases of the game of football, including philosophy, play concepts, questions, and more. Joining me today is another good coaching colleague of mine, Coach Dale Buessing. I coached at Axtell for about 2.5 years there and really got to know all the coaches. I've had Coach Detweiler and the young Coach Buessing on here now, and all I got left after this is to have Craig on, but Coach Buessing is the defensive coordinator at Axtell High School in Axtell, Kansas. He's heading into his 12th year as a coach and all coming in the same position at Axtell there as the defensive coordinator. Axtell's made to the semifinals in 7 out of the 11 years he's been coaching. They've won 39 consecutive games, including 3 consecutive state championships, all in convincing fashion and not giving up many points in the process, including a shutout in the state championship last year, 50-0. Well, Coach, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mitch.
Just start by telling us a little bit about yourself and playing in high school and how you got into coaching.
Yeah, well, I went to high school at Axtell, graduated in 1996. We had success there in school. We won state my sophomore year in 1993, had a couple good coaches and really enjoyed football. And the position came open there in Axtell. The head coach resigned, and they didn't really have anybody to take it. So a couple buddies of mine and myself decided we should throw our names in the hat and see if we could get the job. And lo and behold, we did. So I think they must have been pretty desperate for applicants because they took us. But I guess it's worked out pretty well anyway. So
who was your high school coach?
Clint Bailey and Don Stripe were the high school coaches I had all 4 years in high school. Learned a ton from those guys. Big mentors of mine. I learned how to goof off from one, and I probably learned how to be serious from the other. So it's maybe a good mix. But even when we took this position, I reached out to both of those guys and said, "Hey, I need some help. I want to pick your brain. I want to try to learn from you. And they've been mentors to me the whole time. And I still talk to them off and on, and just great coaches, and was very lucky to have them. And I was hoping to become something like that for some of these kids that came through Axtell. That I was fortunate to have some good coaches, and I'm just hoping that some of these other kids that are playing the sport that I love so well to have good coaches as well. So that's why I decided I'd see what I could do, at least give effort. I didn't know how good a coach I would be, but I was gonna, do my darndest to give the most effort I could, and so that's kind of led us to where we are now.
Yeah. Speaking from experience, I definitely think that those guys, all the past players you've had, and even the current ones, would say that about you for sure. So here, then my next question I have. So obviously, I'll never get to coach for my hometown school, not having a school anymore. But could you just talk about what that's been like for you coaching? I mean, I know you haven't coached anywhere else, but what's it like coaching for the same school that you went to and same town that you've always been around?
Yeah, it's been pretty great, honestly. We had some traditions when I was in school, and we still carry some of those on the way we in practice. Some of our pregame stuff that we do, listening to different music and different songs. I remember being a player, getting goosebumps, at some of those moments. And it's crazy. The first year we were back coaching, I walked into the locker room in our high school, and I hadn't been in there in forever. And I walk in there, and it's like I still had that same smell. It's like it just brought me back almost, back to when I was playing. And it's just crazy to, I guess I'm just reliving the glory days this year after year, and can't play anymore. But I still got to step in that locker room every day and smell the stink that's in there, I guess, and have all the fun that comes with it without doing the work. So it's been great.
Football, high school football, it's a sport like no other. You can never go back, even for fun, to just go put them on. So you just reliving the high school days, just going into the locker room, and man, that's got to be an awesome feeling.
It really is. You touch on a great point where it's a sport like no other. I mean, it takes a whole team. You can go out and shoot baskets in your driveway by yourself, but you can't play football by yourself very well. And that's the family and the camaraderie that you build with your teammates, and it's just a great thing.
That's why more kids need to be doing it. But you guys had pretty much everybody going out, though.
Yeah, there's maybe 2 or 3 kids in high school that aren't out. That's about it.
What's something different? It might not be that different, but what's something you think is different that you guys do that, other Kansas 8-man teams might not do?
Well, I don't know if other teams don't, because I think a lot of do. But one thing I'm going to touch on is game film, and we feel like it's a very important part of our process, our teaching process, and our studying process, learning other teams what they're going to do. But not even that so much. It's just watching ourselves and showing the kids in a game like setting. This is what you did, but this is what you should have done. If you look at for instance what's happening in this play up to this point, why did you react the way you reacted? And talking with them through it. And I read an article on a really successful volleyball coach one time, and he said that watching game film during practice was a waste of time, and I couldn't have disagreed with him more. I mean, yeah, if you want to do it at night or whatever, that's fine too. But you've got to get that in. To me, it's almost as important or more important than the time on the field. Just I feel like we can teach so much in those situations, and I do feel like that's one area we stress a lot is watching game film. And I'm sure there's other coaches out there and other teams that do as well. So I'm not trying to say we're the only ones that do that, but we do take it very, very seriously.
And I know again from experience watching film with you guys. And would you tell everybody about when do you guys watch film? And then my next question with that would be, do you ever film practices, or is it just games?
We've tried filming practices before, but we don't do that a whole lot. Didn't really like the way that went, so we don't really do practices much. Um, our rundown is basically after a game on Friday night, we go back to one of our houses, and the coaches will break down the film that night. And I know emotions are raw sometimes from the game, and it can get a little heated. And some days you would think us coaches would never talk to each other again, but that's just kind of how we challenge each other, and how we watch. And it might be 2 or 3 in the morning before we get done, but we break down that game that we just played, what we did right, what we did wrong, what we need to change. And then we share it with our kids right away, and we expect them to watch it themselves over the weekend. And then obviously over the weekend we'll break down the next opponent's film, and try to get as much knowledge about them, and have a game plan going into Monday of what we want to do in practice that week. And then come Monday, the first thing we do at practice on Monday is go over that game from Friday night, and show the kids, hey, this is what we need to change. This is what we did well. And when we talk about that, but we try not to spend a ton of time on that, because we also want to watch some key plays that the other teams run, and kind of show the kids a little bit of what we feel like they might see on Friday night that week.
The late evenings watching film, that's just a great thing right there to have your whole coaching staff watching the film, because everybody's seeing things maybe a little bit different. There might be one thing here, one or whatever else, and then you guys specifically having your sons involved in the game, getting to coach them and then watching the film with you. They're going to know every in and out of how you see it prior to when
Yeah.
they get to take the field, and that's an awesome thing. And I guess currently the only one would be Wyatt now probably, but I mean
Yeah.
that's invaluable for sure.
Sure. Yeah, it really is. It becomes that's what you do on Friday night. And like you said, you might have 2 or 3 people in that living room, but usually you got 4 or 5. You got, our boys, or maybe, past player, or our sons that played in the past watching with us, and they understand what we're thinking and what we're doing. You get just a different perspective, and it really is a nice thing.
And again, you guys being coaching together for so long, the system's pretty well known, obviously, between you guys and then and players and former players, as you said too. Yeah, that obviously helps as well. But one more thing about that though, you guys, I know we never had any JV games when I was there the 2 years because we didn't have the numbers. But how do you balance Monday film time if you have a JV game? How has that worked, I guess?
Well, that's what honestly is a struggle for us. That JV game is really needed for those players. And in the
Hmm.
several years, we didn't have enough kids, so we never had any JV games. We maybe play a fifth quarter, or try to get them in at the end of the varsity game. But like now, we've got enough kids, we can have a JV game. If it's a home JV game, it's not that big a deal. But we'll just go watch game film before the JV game, just like we normally would on Monday.
Yep.
And that's our Monday practice, is watching film. We won't even go down to the game or the practice field. We'll just stay there and watch film, and then we'll go from there straight to the JV game. So that actually doesn't work bad. But when we go on the road with the JV guys, we're taking a lot of players that played in that game on Friday night. If they played offense, for instance, a lot, and barely play defense, so in the JV game, maybe they'll play defense, but they won't play offense or something. But anyhow, a lot of those players, go both ways. We want them to see all that. So usually we push game film back to Tuesday, and we do it on Tuesday then, and that shortens your practice week up. But
Mhm.
we feel it's that important that we still want to get together as a team and watch it.
Oh, I agree 100% too. I think the film is huge. I mean, you can't really learn. I mean, you can, but it's that much more beneficial if you can learn it by seeing what mistakes you've made and then know what to do better the next time. If you never watching film, I feel like you're way behind in today's game of football. I mean, especially with Huddle and all the access to film that everybody has anyway. Going into the next question there, so and I know obviously you've been defensive coordinator and ran the defense. You've ran the defense basically all 11 years, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
And so obviously you guys have had a ton of success defensively, especially recently. I couldn't remember the Wheatland Grinnell championship game score, but I know you 45 Thunder Ridge and you obviously 45 South Central last year in a shutout. I mean, anytime you've won 3 championship games in a row and your defense is, not giving up many points, you definitely want to ask about what kind of defense do you guys run?
We run a lot of a lot of 3-3. We run some 2-5, is what I call it. We try to vary it a little bit. Anytime you can keep a team guessing, it definitely helps. But we get pretty predictable. If we have one defense that's working well for us, we stick with it quite a bit. And within that defense, we like to blitz or roll coverages or maybe switch from man to zone a little bit. But it kind of varies there. But we really ran that 2-5 a lot last few years. We ran that quite a bit, and I've toyed with that defense since actually the second year I started coaching back in 2014. We played Attica Argonia in a sub-state game, and we were having trouble stopping them, and I had been implementing that a little bit, and so I ran that 2-5 in that game, and we got smoked. I mean, it looked terrible. We played it terrible, and I was like, well, back to the drawing board with that one. And I can remember after the game, Coach Detweiler told me, he says, I think we can scrap that defense, and well, that's just extra motivation for me. Then no, I'm gonna show you this will
Yeah,
work.
yeah.
And but I got to thinking, in the NFL, they have three down linemen a lot on an 11-man field. Why are we having three down linemen in an 8-man field, which is even more wide open game? Can we put two linemen down and get more, if you want to call them skill position or more athletes on the field? But what I've come to the conclusion is you need to put your best 8 athletes on the field. In some years, that means you have three linemen out there. And I've tried to convert linemen in the past to a linebacker to run a 2-5 defense. And if you have somebody that just cannot play a linebacker spot, you really need to run a 3-man front then. So that's why we've kind of varied it some, just depending on your personnel. But anytime you can get athletes out on the field and quick guys and 8-man especially, that just goes a long way.
I 100% agree with you too, adapting your defense to your guys. I mean, if you got the guys to run three defensive linemen, if you have two really good D ends and you can put them both out there and you have a good nose guard, definitely. I mean, if and
Right,
obviously if the following year's different and you have to adjust, or like when we had Colby Talbot, and we really didn't have another defensive lineman type guy,
right.
where you had to kind of shift what's the kid's name? I can't even think of his name right now. The tall
Clark Warner.
Yeah, Clark. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he
And he
obviously
wasn't. He was a small kid,
yeah.
and that's one thing I've learned over the years is don't pigeonhole a kid just because you think, well, that kid is small and he's fast. He'd be a good corner, but he might be the most aggressive kid on your team, and he might get burnt every time on a pass play because he's coming up so fast and they're going past him.
Mhm.
And he might be your perfect middle linebacker, even though in the old days you wanted this big beefy guy in the middle that wasn't afraid to smack somebody and lay the wood. Well, the game's changed. You don't need that guy so much anymore. And read your kids and put them where they need to be. And we put some pretty small kids up on the line because they're quick or they're smart or for whatever reason. And it's worked really well for us. So don't pigeonhole a kid, in my opinion, just because of his body type. We played Attica Argonia that year. They had a kid, I think his name was Alec McDaniel, was their middle linebacker, and we couldn't block him. He was like he's probably 5'9", 5'10", buck 50. I mean, he's
Mhm.
a small kid, but it's like blocking water. You couldn't do it, and it's like, man, that there's something to that. And so yeah, we've come a long ways.
And again, I mean, adapting defenses, and maybe it's just because you guys have been together so long and everybody knows it, and a freshman knows it and they know it that year and they know it all four. But my question would be, how do you adjust defenses year to year or week to week? How do you teach kids to to still understand their role or their position group if you're changing defenses?
I'll bet we spend about as much time scrimmaging in practice as anybody does. Um, Too much to my liking sometimes, probably, but it's not live scrimmage necessarily. It's kind of a thud type scrimmage. But by doing that, when we have those JV guys on defense going against our varsity offense, for instance, we'll switch up our defenses a lot just to make the varsity offense have something different to look at. So you're constantly changing your defense. And so I'm constantly rotating guys in and out on the JV side, and they're playing different positions. And I'm talking to them the whole time between plays, talking about what your responsibilities are and what you need to be doing, what you need to be thinking. And so I think they just kind of get used to it from the JV days, from early on. And then as they get older and they start getting onto the varsity side of the football, well, they've already done it, and they've been there, and yeah, they might have to learn a little bit, but just be aggressive and play, and they seem to pick it up pretty good that way.
And a lot of times, if your first team offense to whatever your JV defense happens to be, whoever you have out there, if that gap is wide at all, then yeah, you might have to change up defenses a million times just to give them a decent look.
Right.
Overall, I mean, you've been coaching now 11 years. I'm getting close to that. I think I'm going on year 9 now. But I mean, majority of that's been an assistant and with Tiernan for 4 years. So a lot of it was stuff that I was used to. Yeah, anyway, how do you think defenses or even offenses from your days playing in high school and then in now coaching for 11 years, how do you think that's changed in the 8-man game?
Well, it's changed tremendously. When I played in the 90s, almost every team lined up in a 4-man defensive front. And then now we're in a 2-man defensive front. I mean, that's just completely different. The game, there was a lot of smash mouth type football back then, and it was probably boring in my opinion, just running right up the middle and, little counter traps and that kind of stuff. And it's spread out so much more. And 8-man is a game in itself. I mean, there's so much one-on-one stuff. It's so different than 11-man in that aspect. And it has spread out, and you've got to be able to cover some of those guys in a one-on-one type situation. And it's changed a lot since then. But even in the last 12 years since I've coached, it's gone that way. It used to be everybody ran a 3-2. Well, a lot of teams still run a 3-2. A lot of teams are running a lot of other stuff now too, and things evolve. And it's a copycat game. And I'm no different. We've got several defenses that are named after other teams because they ran that defense. And so everybody's changing, and oh, this guy's doing this defense and it's working pretty good. I might try that, or at least try a little blitz package like they're doing, or something like that. And so it just constantly evolves. I think just how the game is, but it's definitely more wide open game now than it used to be.
Going back to what you were saying earlier, though, about adapting your defense to your guys. Again, if a new defense or a new offense or whatever the spread game benefits my guys more, yeah, why not? Why not
Right.
adjust to them?
All right, next question here.
Just tell us more about last year. I know obviously you guys won state, but you've now won 3 in a row. Talk about
What that's been like.
Well, it has been a great thing. We've been fortunate to have some really good athletes. They buy in and they work hard. And we won the first one 3 years ago, and I can remember, I don't know who said it. We could probably look it up, but a famous coach said, it's easier to get to the top than to stay on the top. And everybody's gunning for you. You got a target on your back, and rightfully so. I mean, we had the same thing with other teams, when we were playing earlier. And you're always trying to stay as good as you can. And that's the key, I think, is keeping those kids motivated and hungry and working for something, And our kids do a great job at that. They're bought in, their families are bought in. If they're not there at the weight room in the morning, we call mom and dad, say, hey, what's going on? Where's Joe at this morning? Where's Bob, and where are they at? And they say, hey, they should have been there, and we have a lot of support from the family, and that helps. Our employers around town know the kids might be late to work because they're lifting weights, and then they're doing their stuff in the morning. And that's key when you can get everybody to buy in like that. That really, really gets things going.
Absolutely, I agree. I've always said similar things coming from B&B.
we were very successful, but it was the culmination of all what you just said. Great community, great teachers, coaches, and players, but all that together being on the same page. Was that hard to get the community, like early on? Was it ever hard to get parents to be on the same page as far as getting kids there for weights or whatever else?
No, not really. I think they were excited for us coming in as coaches. The community, has known me my whole life, and then Eric as well, and Craig. That they've known us our whole lives, And we've coached baseball in the past, the little kids baseball and stuff. They kind of knew about us, I think, and they knew that we'd be bought in and we'd be motivated, and we'd do all we could, be successful. And so they were on board with us. And we've had a few parents over the years, that they want their kid to skip for this and that and for all these other things. And they're like, no, that's not the way it's going to work. If your kid misses practice, well, he's going to have to run. Practice is important. But no, for the most part, that everybody has bought in, and we really had no issues with it.
I might be in the minority on this, but I wish they'd go back to Keisha regulating the summer where you just said, nope, coach can't coach you. I think that would get kids into weights.
Oh, absolutely.
Or more than it, because that's what we did. We would play maybe one MNYB tournament, and you couldn't play with your coach. You couldn't play with all of your team because that was against the rules. So we just played baseball and we went to weights every day. I mean, that was our athletic time. I kind of wish they'd go back to that and kids could be kids, but
I totally agree with you. Kids can be kids again. They get so busy in the summer. I wish they would regulate it again.
yeah. And there was a talk about it last year,
but nothing ever came of it. Definitely something they probably need to look at going forward.
Well, here, let's go back to a couple of last few questions in here. But yeah, you talked about last year, obviously having an unselfish team and all the buy-in from the community and the players. And, I mean, every year's a new season. I know you got some underclassmen coming back, but what are you most excited about for next year?
Just continuing what we've been working on. It seems like every year, and especially the last couple of years, of course, we've faced a very good Care Paravel football team, and we've struggled those first games. And it's trying to find the kids that fit the position on the field, and especially on defense. I think, oh, this kid will play linebacker, he'll be all right. And you get in the game, and it's like the kid's not aggressive, he ain't gonna cut it. And it's like maybe we can move him to corner and just moving guys around. And early on in the season, that's what happens a lot, moving guys here and there, and trying to figure out who's gonna progress and who's just not gonna get it and not gonna make it. And that's always a challenge I kind of like early on, especially is trying to figure that out. But just found out today that the state games are moved to Kiowa County for 8-man now. So hey, it's a new venue. We've never been there, so let's go try to make it there and play a game on that field. So each and every week brings a challenge, and our league and our district and our area has a lot of very talented teams. So it's always fun week to week.
First game jitters, getting them out of the way, or adapting to a new team in the first game is always tough to do that. Who do you guys play next year? First game.
It's either Lynn or Washington. Those are our first two games. I believe it's Lynn coming right out of the chute. We're very familiar with both those teams, and they're in our jamboree, and we've seen them several times.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're familiar with those teams. But every year is different. They're going to have different kids at different spots. They might change stuff, some coaching philosophy and different things. So it'll be a good test for us coming out of the gate.
I mean, I'm assuming your district's going to be very similar to what it was with Hanover and Frankfort, I'm guessing.
Yeah, Lynn's not in our district anymore, and we bring in Wakefield, I believe. Otherwise, it's the same. Blue Valley, yeah, Frankfort, Hanover.
But yeah, so then we'll kind of wrap it up here. But this last question, I know you kind of already said this, but feel free to repeat it. But just any advice to current or future football coaches out there?
Yeah, just try to learn from people. I've learned from so many coaches. Coaching with you, Mitch, I've learned from you, and Coach Brian Smits used to coach at B&B. There was a defensive coach. I wasn't afraid to pick his brain. He's been a good person to talk to. The coach that coached me in the 8-man All-Star game years ago, Jeff Hostetter, I've talked to him a time or two. I'm not afraid to ask people's opinions. I don't think I know it all, and I don't think we know everything there is to know. And there's always things to learn. And you might not agree with everybody else or the way they look at things, but you might pick up one thing from them and implement into your system or what you're trying to do. And I think that's key. Is just do your homework and try to learn from as many people as you can, and try to keep the kids aggressive, especially on defense. They've got to be aggressive. They can't play scared. They can't play slow. They got to be aggressive and put kids, where their mentality is, and just because a kid is small doesn't mean he's a corner, for instance. You might be the best linebacker you have, and you might not realize it till you put them there. Sometimes you got to move kids around a little bit to try to figure out where they best fit.
Well said. Just being adaptable. I mean, as a coach, continuing to learn, asking questions, don't be afraid. There's that saying, Navy admiral back in the day said that the most dangerous phrase in our language is this is the way we've always done it. And I've always thought that, I mean, I've heard people say that, but I didn't know the quote at the time. But I'm thinking, yeah, if just because this is how you've always done it doesn't always mean that's the best. I mean, again, if it's working,
Stick with it.
but I mean, if it's not, don't be afraid to keep learning or try something new or ask somebody else. I mean, definitely, I agree. That's well said.
For sure, because at some point what you're doing might not work, and then you're going to need a backup plan. And yeah, so it's great to always be learning, and I couldn't agree with that quote more.
Well, Coach, thanks again for doing this.
Really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, you're welcome, Coach. Good talking to you anytime.
And that's going to do it for this episode of the 8-Man Breakdowns podcast. If you ever have a question for me, feel free to comment below on this video or follow and message me on Twitter at 8Man Breakdowns. If you've learned anything or enjoyed the video, please click subscribe and check out some of my other videos right here. And as always, guys, thanks for tuning in.